Hey all you cool cats and kittens. Today I just wanted to do an example from the notes that you took yesterday. I know some of you work better if you can see an example worked out step by step instead of reading those silly old slides. So here we go. So I've already put the formula here on the board for the sine of x plus y. So if we needed, let's say, to find the exact value of the sine of 5 pi over 12. Now in the slides we did the exact value of cosine of 5 pi over 12, so I'm using that same angle. Well, pi over 12 isn't on our charts, so we're going to use this cool formula. First of all, we need to think of a way to write 5 pi over 12 as the sum of two angles that are on our charts. So 5 pi over 12, and this just takes practice knowing this, and y'all aren't going to have to come up with this sum yourself, not right to begin with. We'll work on that later. But 5 pi over 12, I can write that as 2 pi over 12 plus 3 pi over 12. And that's going to simplify. 2 pi over 12 actually simplifies to pi over 6. 3 pi over 12 simplifies to pi over 4. And both of these angles are on our charts. Now notice 5 pi over 12, since it is less than half a pi, this is going to be in quadrant 1. And remember, the only reason why we need to know the quadrants is so that we know the sign, S-I-G-N, of our answer. And the sign in the first quadrant, actually all of the trig functions in the first quadrant, is going to be positive. So we know our answer is going to be positive. So now I'm going to rewrite this as the sine of this pi over 6 plus pi over 4. And then according to this formula, unfortunately this isn't a distributive property. We're not taking the sine times these angles. We're taking the sine of the sum of these angles. So we can't just say it's the sine of pi over 6 plus the sine of pi over 4. You know, math's never that easy. So we're going to plug these values into our formula. So pi over 6 is our angle that we're calling x. Pi over 4 is our angle that we're calling y. So when we plug that into this formula, we're going to have the sine of pi over 6 times the cosine, notice it's of y, so it's going to be of pi over 4, plus, and now the cosine of x, which is pi over 6, times the sine of y, which is pi over 4. Now, all of these values we know very, very well. Y'all should know these in your sleep. I'm not going to write the chart down. You've got the chart in your notes probably many different times. And notice we're doing this without a calculator. You have to be on your Scout's honor here. You're not supposed to be using your calculator. And in fact, if you did use your calculator, some of you would get a decimal answer rather than our exact answer. From our chart, the sine of pi over 6 is a half. The cosine of pi over 4 is the square root of 2 over 2. The cosine of pi over 6 is the square root of 3 over 2. And the sine of pi over 4 is the square root of 2 over 2. So now we're just using basic math. It's no longer trig, it's no longer pre-cal, it's just basic math of multiplying fractions. So 1/2 times the square root of 2 over 2, you multiply the numerators, get the square root of 2, multiply your denominators, you get 4. Over here, since we're multiplying two square roots, we can combine those to be the square root of 6. It's also the square root of 4. And now since that's over the same denominator, it's considered simplified to write that as a single fraction. So there's a nice example of this particular formula live for you. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.